One DNA test, and the truth shook a billion-dollar empire to its core. The vast living room glowed with soft golden light washing over dark wooden walls polished to a gleam, as if freshly cleaned. A crystal chandelier sparkled high above its prisms, trembling each time a breeze slipped through the half-open window. Everything in the room exuded opulence: the deep brown Italian leather sofa, the antique Persian rug, the wine rack stocked with rare vintages. Yet beneath all this splendor, the air was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. On the gleaming wooden table lay a plain white envelope, just a single thin sheet inside, but it carried enough weight to alter the lives of at least 2 people forever. Each tick of the antique wall clock struck like a hammer against the chest, stretching the silence into torture. The young woman sat perched on the edge of the sofa, her back rigid, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her eyes swept across the room, landing on the envelope, then darting away again as though one more second of looking at it might shatter her heart. That heart thundered, torn between desperate hope and paralyzing fear. A bead of sweat slid from her temple, tracing slowly down her cheek. Across from her, the middle-aged billionaire sat tall, his face carved from stone. The golden light sharpened the angles of his features, making them look even harsher. Yet deep in his dark eyes flickered a fragile spark, like a secret begging to escape after years of suppression. His fingers tapped lightly against the armrest, an old habit, when he tried to disguise unease. The room seemed to swallow every sound. No cars outside, no wind brushing the curtains, only silence and the furious pounding of hearts. The camera edged closer to the white envelope. A trembling hand reached forward, touched it. The girl drew a long, shuddering breath, her shoulders trembling. A memory flashed across her mind. Her mother's young face, sorrowful eyes staring into emptiness, and those haunting words. "Your father is not the man you think he is." The recollection sliced through her like a blade. She had always believed her father was nothing but a distant shadow, a name never spoken. But now this paper could finally reveal the truth. The billionaire tilted his head, his gaze locked on her every movement. He had known this day would come, the day the secret unraveled, the day the past crashed into the present. He had built an empire shielded by wealth and power, but no fortress could stop the truth written in blood. The girl tore open the envelope. The dry rip of paper cut through the silence like a curtain ripped down after decades. Her trembling fingers drew out the sheet. The camera zoomed in on the bold printed words, "Probability of paternity 99.9% match." Her eyes widened. The world collapsed and then detonated in her mind. Her throat tightened, breath caught. Everything around her blurred, leaving only that single line carved into her soul. A deathly stillness. Then the paper slipped from her fingers, landing on the polished wood, with a sound that thundered like a storm in a clear sky. The camera lingered on the billionaire's face. His lips trembled, his eyes flashing with something he could no longer hold back. For the first time, the powerful man's cold mask cracked, his eyes shimmered damp on the edge of breaking. The narrator's voice rumbled low, heavy, magnetic, as if whispering straight into the viewer's ear. That poor girl never imagined one test would change her life forever. Who is her true father? Why had he hidden it all these years? And now? Will this truth heal them or destroy them both? The window burst open, the wind tearing through, whipping the white curtains like a storm warning. The camera froze on the girl's face, fear shock, and the desperate longing for an answer. The lights in the room snapped out, leaving only the relentless ticking of the clock echoing like a countdown to a story about truth, family, and the devastating price of secrets. The little cafe sat humbly on the corner of an old street, its bricks weathered and stained by years of rain and sun. A soft jingle of the bell rang out each time someone pushed the door, blending with the aroma of freshly roasted coffee, the sweetness of pastries, and the faint dust of the road outside. The space was warm and cozy, yet for the young woman behind the counter, it felt more like a stage where she played the same role over and over again. The quiet, diligent waitress, always smiling even as emptiness lingered deep inside her. Her name was Elena. From as early as she could remember, she had grown up without a father. Her mother, a single woman, gave her youth to raise her daughter alone. Their meals were rarely full most nights, just boiled vegetables, thin broth, and a bowl of plain rice. But hunger wasn't what haunted Elena. What lingered, what gnawed at her heart, were the questions that never had answers. Who is my father? Why has he never once appeared in my life? Elena's childhood was defined by moments of standing in the schoolyard watching classmates walk hand in hand with both parents. On holidays, when other children proudly displayed gifts from their fathers, she would simply turn away, hiding her hurt behind a practiced smile. Once she had asked her mother about him. The woman's silence was telling, eyes clouded with sorrow, quickly shifting the subject. That silence followed Elena through the years, an old wound that never fully healed. Now a young woman, Elena still lived under the shadow of that absence. She worked long hours at the cafe, her small hands calloused from carrying trays and scrubbing cups. Yet in her sad brown eyes burned a quiet yearning, the longing to find the missing piece of her life. Every time she saw a family gathered around a table sharing laughter and gentle looks, she would pause just a little too long. Her smile as she set down a coffee cup masked a yearning she never dared to voice. One rainy afternoon, as Elena wiped down the bar, her gaze drifted to the old television mounted on the wall. The news was running a segment on the economy, and then he appeared tall, commanding with a stern face and a perfectly tailored suit, striding through a barrage of camera flashes. His name scrolled across the screen in bold letters: Alexander Grant, billionaire, founder of a leading global investment group. The patrons murmured in awe, marveling at his success and immense wealth. But Elena went quiet. She stared at the man's face, so distant, yet strangely familiar. In those cold eyes, she thought she glimpsed something uncanny, like a reflection of herself. For a fleeting second, she shivered, then quickly looked away, convincing herself it was nothing but imagination. Across the world, Alexander's life seemed flawless. Palatial mansions, luxury cars, glittering parties drenched in champagne and flashbulbs. To the media, he was the ultimate symbol of success and power. Yet anyone who had caught a glimpse of him in unguarded moments could see the truth: a profound loneliness. He avoided every question about family. No one knew of a wife. No one knew of a child. His personal life was a fortress, impenetrable even to the most ruthless tabloids. In the glass office perched at the top of his skyscraper headquarters, Alexander often worked late into the night. The city lights washed over his face, casting a shadow across the windowpane. The red wine in his glass would slowly dwindle, but his gaze remained fixed on the dark horizon. In those moments, he was not a billionaire, not a titan of industry. He was just a man alone, haunted by secrets he had never dared to face. That contrast, Elena poor but aching for family, and Alexander rich but hollow without it, was the axis of fate. Two lives that should never have touched were bound by an invisible thread blood. Elena had no idea that every wistful glance at the families in her cafe, every sleepless night, longing for the father she had never met, was a call to destiny. And Alexander, though he tried to bury it, could not escape the reflection in his own eyes each time he looked at an old photograph hidden in his desk drawer. In that private silence, he carried a yearning he had buried for decades to be called just once by two simple words: Dad. One winter night, while cleaning out her late mother's dusty attic, Elena's eyes caught a small wooden box buried beneath blankets. The lock was rusted, but the lid was loose, just a twist, and it gave way. Inside, among yellowed letters and a few trinkets, lay an old photograph. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. Under the dim glow of the attic bulb, she saw her mother, young, radiant, with a rare smile. And beside her arm, draped lightly over her shoulder, stood a man in a suit. Elena's breath hitched. She knew that face instantly. It was Alexander Grant, the billionaire she had seen on television only weeks before. The photo pierced her like a knife. 1,000 questions rushed in, crushing her chest until she could hardly breathe. Had her mother once loved him? Why had she never spoken of it? Could it be? Was he her father? She sank to the wooden floor, fingers tracing the photo's worn edges. The wind howled through the cracks in the attic window, like a whisper from the past, pulling fragments of memory from the shadows. Her mother's unfinished words from long ago came back to her. There are things you don't need to know. Just live your life, Elena. But how could she go on when the truth stared her in the face? The next day, Elena confided in her aunt, the only family she had left. Instead of sympathy, her aunt laughed bitterly. You're out of your mind. Do you really think a man like Alexander Grant ever had anything to do with us? Don't fool yourself. He's rich and powerful. We're nothing. You'll only make a fool of yourself. The words stung like ice water, but denial only fanned the fire inside her. Elena couldn't let it go. The rumor spread quickly when a friend accidentally saw the photo. Whispers rippled through the neighborhood. That girl thinks she's the billionaire's daughter, delusional. Just wants attention. Every step Elena took was met with stares, snickers, and cruel gossip. Each laugh, each cutting remark felt like a blade. Yet she clenched her jaw and endured. The truth mattered more than her pride. One evening, she did the unthinkable. She went to Alexander's mansion. The towering iron gates loomed before her, cold and imposing like the barrier between two worlds. She pressed the intercom. The metallic chime rang into the night. Moments later, the gate creaked open, and an old butler appeared, silver hair, sharp eyes glinting behind rimmed glasses. What do you want? His voice was dry, guarded. Elena drew a breath, clutching the photo in her hand. I need to see Mr. Alexander Grant. I have something important. Something very important. The butler arched a brow, scanning her from head to toe. His gaze lingered on her worn shoes, her threadbare coat, and he let out a mocking laugh. My master has no time for beggars. Do you know who he is? One of the most powerful men in the world. And you? Just a cafe waitress. Go home. Her knees shook, but she stood her ground. She held out the photograph, her voice cracking, but her eyes blazing. He knew my mother. This is proof. I just want the truth. I have the right to know. For the briefest second, the butler's expression faltered as he looked at the photo, but it vanished just as quickly. His tone hardened. I don't know where you got this, but take my advice, never come back here. You're digging your own grave. The iron gate slammed shut. Elena stood alone in the freezing wind, tears streaking her cheeks, but she bit her lip until it bled. She would not break. In the days that followed, every door seemed to close in her face. Friends drifted away. Co-workers mocked her. Family turned their backs. She was branded a dreamer, a gold digger. But the weaker they thought she was, the stronger her resolve grew. At night, she lay in bed with the photo pressed to her chest. In her dreams, Alexander's face appeared woven with longing, anger, and questions that refused to fade. She whispered to herself, if I don't find the truth, I'll live in torment forever. I must know, no matter the cost. Elena returned to the mansion. This time, the butler did not turn her away immediately. He stepped out, his eyes flickering with a strange mix of pity and ice. You truly want to know? Sometimes. The truth is not a gift. It can destroy you. Elena clenched her fists, her voice clear and steady, no longer trembling. No matter how painful, I must know. Because this is my life. The girl once dismissed as nothing more than a servant had crossed the line of fear. Her determination would drive her to the next step, a DNA test where the truth could no longer be denied. A misty morning blanketed the city in a cold, pale fog. Elena wrapped herself in a worn wool sweater, clutching her handbag tightly to her chest as though guarding a secret too heavy to bear. Her footsteps echoed softly against the tiled corridor of the clinic, each sound reverberating twice as loud inside her chest. At the far end of the hall, the DNA testing room glowed with sterile neon light spilling through the glass panel. Cold, unfeeling. She stopped before the door, her hand trembling on the knob, unable to turn it. In her mind, a whisper. If the result denies it, I lose everything. But if it's true, my entire life will change. She drew a deep breath and turned the handle. The door swung open, releasing the sharp sting of disinfectant. The room was stark white, furnished with nothing but a few plastic chairs and a gleaming stainless steel table. A technician offered a faint professional smile, motioning her to sit. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? The voice was gentle, but carried the weight of a warning. Elena swallowed hard. From her bag, she pulled 2 envelopes of hair samples, one her own, the other taken in secret from Alexander's estate garden. Her fingers shook so violently she nearly dropped them. She laid the envelopes on the table, her wide eyes fixed on them as though pouring her entire soul into the paper that would soon seal her fate. The camera lingered on her face, every muscle taut, her gaze locked on her clasped hands. The scratch of the pen as the technician logged, the samples clicked against the silence, mingling with the steady tick-tock of the wall clock. Every second stretched into eternity. Across town, Alexander sat alone in his glass-walled office, towering over the city skyline. The glittering view of skyscrapers meant nothing. On his desk lay an old photograph, one he had hidden away for years, of himself and Elena's mother, younger, smiling. His large hand shook as he lifted it. His eyes blurred, piercing through the photo into a past he had buried. Regret gnawed at him, paired with a suffocating fear. If she truly is my daughter, do I have the strength to face her? And if not, can I live with this secret any longer? He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. But behind the darkness of his lids, Elena's face appeared, her eyes mirroring the woman he once loved. He shot upright, poured himself a glass of red wine, but left it untouched. The liquid shimmered under the office lights as his heavy sigh filled the silence, cracking the fortress of power he had built. Back at the cafe, the waiting days dragged on endlessly for Elena. She served coffee with clumsy hands, spilling cups, dropping trays. Customers whispered, co-workers snickered behind her back. She's getting some test to prove she's a rich man's daughter. Delusional. Just chasing money. Each word cut like glass. Elena forced smiles, but when she turned away, her eyes burned with unshed tears. At night, she lay in the dark, hugging her pillow, listening to the clock's relentless ticking. Each tick-tock dragged her deeper into the abyss of doubt. One night, she dreamed of opening the envelope, only to see the cold words, "No match." In the dream, she collapsed, sobbing while laughter rang in her ears. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding as though it would burst. But sometimes hope flickered. Staring into the mirror, she saw her own eyes she couldn't mistake, and whispered, "I have the right to know. I'm not wrong for searching for the truth." The days of waiting became a trial of fire. Social pressure, the terror of rejection, the fragile flame of hope. They rose and fell like crashing waves, pulling her into an ocean of uncertainty. Finally, the day came. Elena sat in the waiting room, the cold plastic chair pressing against her. Her hands shook uncontrollably in her lap, fingers locking together so tightly they hurt. The technician entered holding a sealed envelope. In that instant, every sound around her vanished. No footsteps. No traffic outside. Only the deafening thud of her own heartbeat hammering against her ribs. Her lips parted, eyes shimmering with tears yet burning bright. Her breath came in shallow gasps. The air tightened, stretched taut like a string ready to snap. The envelope just inches away held the power to destroy her, or finally set her free. The hospital waiting room gleamed under harsh white light, the neon glow casting a cold, suffocating air. Elena sat across from Alexander. Only a few feet separated them, yet it felt like an ocean where poverty and wealth, longing and power waited either to merge or to shatter apart. In the hands of the nurse was a sealed envelope. Just a thin sheet of paper inside, but it carried the weight of entire lives. No one spoke. Only the relentless ticking of the clock filled the silence, stretching each second into an eternity. Elena swallowed hard, her eyes red. Her hands clamped so tightly together her nails dug into her skin. She trembled, torn between the urge to know and the urge to flee. Alexander, normally an unshakable figure of steel, sat rigid, his jaw tight, the veins on his temple throbbing. He stared at the envelope but dared not touch it, as though even brushing it would bring the walls he had built for decades crashing down. The nurse set the envelope gently on the table, gave a brief nod, and left the room, leaving only the two of them, and a truth about to be revealed. Elena drew a deep breath, her trembling hand reaching forward. She tugged at the flap. The faint tear of paper rang sharp and cold, slicing through years of silence. Her hands shook as she unfolded the sheet. The camera lingered on her eyes, wide glistening, filled with unbearable anticipation. She glanced at him, but Alexander didn't move. His face was stone, his gaze shadowed his body taut as wire. Finally, Elena bit her lip and read, a deadly silence. Then the words bold and undeniable. Probability of paternity 99.9% match. Her eyes widened, tears brimming her throat, closing tight. The world blurred, collapsing into a single line of text seared into her soul. The paper slipped from her trembling hands, landing on the wooden table with a sound that cracked like thunder in both their minds. Alexander leaned forward, his hands trembling as he picked it up. He read once, twice. His lips moved, but no words formed. All the power, the cold composure of a billionaire who had bent markets to his will, crumbled. Before the audience, he was no mogul. He was simply a man who had missed his daughter's entire childhood. His eyes reddened. The first tear slipped free, slow and heavy, carrying decades of buried guilt. He lifted his head, meeting Elena's gaze. No longer cold, no longer distant. His eyes overflowed with regret, sorrow, and a love too long denied. Elena! His voice broke, shaking like a lost child finally finding home. I've missed you for far too long. Elena sobbed, the sound raw, erupting in gasps of pain and release. Years of loneliness, doubt, and aching emptiness poured out in a flood of tears. Alexander reached out his hand, trembling slow and cautious, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. For a heartbeat, Elena hesitated, her tearful eyes searching his. Then she threw herself into his arms. Their first embrace after more than 2 decades. He pulled her tight against his chest, his hand shaking as it stroked her hair, as if trying to make up for every year he'd missed. Elena pressed her face to his chest, feeling his heart strong but unsteady. In that moment, every barrier, wealth and poverty, shame and pride, power and fear crumbled. All that remained was father and daughter found at last in the truth. Light suddenly spilled through the window, sunlight breaking through the clouds. Dust in the air shimmered like tiny stars, turning the scene ethereal. The camera circled slowly, capturing each falling tear, each desperate grip, each forgiving gaze. I'm sorry. Alexander whispered, his voice raw, breaking apart. I'm sorry I wasn't there, that I missed it all. But from now on, I will never leave you again. Elena lifted her tear-streaked face, a trembling smile breaking through. I waited, every day, every night, just to hear you say that. The room no longer felt cold. The ticking clock now kept time with their hearts steady, unified, marking the beginning of something new. The camera lingered on the DNA paper on the table, damp with fallen tears. The words remained bold and permanent. 99.9%. Match. A truth unshakable, forever binding them together. In the days after the truth came to light, the city buzzed with whispers. Newspapers, television, social media, all flooded with headlines. Billionaire Alexander Grant acknowledges secret daughter. Photos of father and daughter appeared on front pages, flashbulbs exploding every time they stepped out together. But for Elena, all that noise was just surface. What mattered wasn't the recognition of the world. It was the recognition in the heart of the man she had once known only through a screen. Now every time she called him Dad, warmth filled the hollow that had lived inside her for so long. And Alexander too was changing. The man once sharp and unyielding grew gentler, his smile more frequent, his gaze no longer shadowed by loneliness. He no longer ran from memory. He dared to face it, to admit his failings, and more importantly, to live with the love he had buried for decades. One morning, Alexander drove Elena out to a quiet cemetery on the city's edge. The road was lined with trees, leaves falling gently, painting the ground in soft gold. The sky was clear, sunlight breaking through branches like a blessing. They stood in silence before the headstone of Elena's mother. Elena placed a bouquet of white flowers at the base, her eyes damp but calm. Beside her, Alexander knelt, his large hand trembling as it touched the cold stone. His voice cracked as if speaking not just to the grave, but to the years he could never reclaim. "I'm sorry for not being there, for missing the chance to raise her with you. But I promise you this, whatever time I have left, I will spend making it right for Elena." A breeze stirred, lifting the petals softly. Elena lowered her head, placing a hand on her father's shoulder, whispering, "Mom has already forgiven you. I know she's been watching over us all along." The camera lingered on father and daughter, standing side by side at the grave, bathed in a tender light that seemed to dissolve every shadow of the past. Time passed. Elena slowly adjusted to her new life, not as the heir, but as a daughter who finally had a family. No more empty chair at the dinner table. No more silence echoing through the house. Instead, laughter filled the air where absence once lived. Alexander, once consumed only by numbers, contracts, and power, began savoring the small things. Evening walks with his daughter, listening to her stories, at the same cafe where she once served tables. And above all, using his wealth for more than himself. He founded a charity in Elena's mother's name, dedicated to children who grew up without parents. Children like Elena once was. The man who once appeared on magazine covers as a cold titan of industry was now seen holding his daughter's hand, his eyes warm, his smile real. The world called it the transformation of a billionaire. But to him it was simpler. It was a homecoming, a return to who he truly was. The final shot is not a gala or a press conference, but something humble. A wooden dinner table, father and daughter seated side by side. No extravagant dishes, only the simple meals Elena once shared with her mother. Alexander, awkward with chopsticks, grinned sheepishly. Elena laughed, her smile radiant, filled with a happiness she had never known before. A simple smile, yet overflowing with joy. Money can build castles, but only truth and family can build a home. Sometimes a painful truth is worth more than 1,000 sweet lies. For it was that truth that mended 2 broken lives, turned emptiness into joy, and transformed a girl once overlooked into a daughter finally loved. The music softens, gentle piano notes falling like drops of light. Do you believe that truth and family have the power to change a life? If you've ever witnessed a moment when love or truth transformed an entire space, share your story in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so together we can keep spreading these human stories that touch the heart.